Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. I got a fun and exciting video for you guys this Saturday evening because yesterday Playable released the Williams Midway Y Core. That's going to run a lot of your favorite games, or at least in theory, but I do want you to be aware before we get too far involved in this video. This is a dual RAM core, one of the first, so you're going to have a dual RAM build for your MiSTer to be able to enjoy the games that are working. But taking a look at Smash TV right now, this is currently functioning on the MiSTer FPGA. Be aware that these are all manual installed cores right now. They are not in update all whatsoever, and I will leave a link to the description below so you can get these on your MiSTer if you want them to. Be aware that this is alpha, and I don't know if it's going to go any further than this. Currently, it runs a few games very well, and some games not well whatsoever, but that is just down to some issues in the technicality of the coding and how it works on MiSTer, because what this core is doing is actually spreading across both RAM sticks with different implementations of the actual game and how it runs in memory. But as far as Smash TV is concerned, outside of the fact that this has no audio whatsoever, this just looks and feels like the game you remember from arcades, and it is an absolute classic. Let's walk through the boot sequence a little bit here. This is pretty much endemic on all Williams Midway boards. You're going to see all of these different ROM checks. These would be all the different chips on the board that it would check on post, and if you get a green, that means everything is perfectly fine. If you see failure in CMOS RAM, that is going to be standard on first boot for all of this hardware. And you'll see here the underdip switches, you are going to have a test which is going to allow you to change all of the different game modes in the arcade board itself, all of the difficulties, coin options. Honestly, you're not really throwing real quarters into your MiSTer, it doesn't matter, but if you want to play around with some of those, they are implemented in this current alpha core. But as we take a look at Smash TV, everything seems graphically fine here. I don't see anything in the image, anything in the sprites, backgrounds, or otherwise that leads me to believe that it's not just pulling off a correct implementation of the arcade board. Obviously, with no audio, there's not really much I can say on that side. It doesn't seem to be built into the core whatsoever, and on an arcade board and pretty much any other piece of hardware, the sound hardware would be separate, so it's possible that that is not yet coded into the FPGA, but just be aware that at least in this experience it's playing on mute and there is no audio whatsoever. Now, I know you're going to ask about Mortal Kombat. It is the most popular board that runs on this actual core, and you're going to see as we go through the boot sequence, you're going to get that same colored snow pattern. That is pretty standard, and if you do see a couple red ROM checks, that doesn't seem to be the biggest issue. I checked under software emulation and saw that as well, but unfortunately, once you actually get into the game, there are going to be graphical issues, and it is going to freeze, and this is down to that dual RAM implementation probably needing more work or maybe hitting some sort of limit. The title screen looks perfectly fine, all of the win streak screens look good. When everything is static, you don't really see much of an issue whatsoever, but the minute anything starts moving on screen, you're going to start getting these graphical issues right here. So I definitely wouldn't say Mortal Kombat is in any way, shape, or form playable. It is a little bit of a mess, but the core was sent out with those notes, so it's not like we're really surprised by what we're seeing here. The question really is whether or not work will continue on this core and how that work will proceed going into the future, because I know a lot of people have been asking about dual RAM, and this is one of the first cores that actually utilizes it, but you'll see here there is just some timing issue there and nothing is drawing correct. As we move back over to Smash TV, you're going to see that isn't the case, and that's just down to how the developers implemented different features or used the hardware. Just because a hardware function is available to the developers does not mean they're going to need to or want to utilize it on every single game they release on that hardware. We've seen a lot of it with the Nintendo 64. Some games utilize a lot more functions of the hardware than others, and that means they're going to run differently. So that's the same thing you're going to be seeing on this arcade hardware right here. But even with no audio, Smash TV is still an absolute banger of an arcade game. I absolutely love playing this. I played it a ton in arcades, and if you get a second player with you and you do two-player mode, you're going to have an absolute blast actually playing this thing. So definitely check Smash TV out on the current core. It is worth playing, and I'm sure you can probably see the credits scroll on it. But let's move around and take a look at some other things that are available on the core as well. If you try to run Terminator 2, you're going to see the screen is flipped, and that is because the cabinet actually used a mirror where it would invert the image. That was popular on some light gun and XY coordinate games where the monitor would actually be mounted underneath the cabinet facing up, and a mirror would image it so you could actually see it and shoot with what you were looking at. Unfortunately, again, this is another game that has some heavy graphical issues. As we move over to Total Carnage, you're going to find that we're right back into the Smash TV territory where everything looks and feels exactly like you would expect it to. So if we're going to get two games that run really well minus sound, we're getting two really good ones here because there's a a lot of other ways to play the original Mortal Kombat, and honestly I think some of those are better than the arcade original, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite version of Mortal Kombat is. I would be curious. And these boards, these games have such a distinct graphical look. Midway Williams games always had a distinct flair to them, and you're seeing that right here with Total Carnage. But as far as the operation of this game is concerned, the playability, it seems to be close to 100% there. Again, you're not going to have any audio whatsoever though, so you are going to be playing this mute. And I know a lot of you are going to ask what's going to happen in the future with this core. I have absolutely no idea. It's possible that it sees a revision. It's possible that another developer picks it up and plays around with it. It's possible that nothing else ever happens after this. And that's the tricky thing about Dual Ram. You are utilizing two independent RAM modules, and if you are spreading game code, ROMs or otherwise across those two modules, you need to get the timing talking to each other so that all of the data is recognized when it would be expected. Because that's the thing, you're not just storing ROMs, you're not just reading data. The hardware, the CPU, is going to expect certain information within a certain amount of cycles, and if it doesn't receive it, the game could crash, it could hang, it could freeze, it could basically throw up graphical glitches, it could do any number of things. So it seems like on Total Carnage and Smash TV, the timing is definitely there, and I don't know whether or not the timing will be possible on MiSTer FPGA. There's a lot of different ways to trick hardware into doing things you want it to do, and there's a lot of different coding techniques that might make this possible in the future, but we're definitely in wait and see territory. But again, as we play Total Carnage here, another classic game that basically feels like an evolution to something like Smash TV, and it's got some of that great cartoon violence we all know and love from arcade games, and it is just a lot of fun. It's just unfortunate that only 2 games currently work on the core, and this is a stable core that was basically finished in December but released by Pramod yesterday on Friday afternoon. And I know a lot of people have been waiting to see footage from this core and waiting for it to come to MiSTer FPGA, and that's why I wanted to do a special video on it. And if you've never heard the Total Carnage soundtrack, definitely give it a listen outside of this video. I'm underlying some of the soundtrack elements, so I'm not just talking over nothing, but I'm not going to give you a sound sample this week because it really isn't in core, it's just the soundtrack laid on top. But as far as the function and gameplay of Total Carnage here, again, it feels like it's just working exactly like you would expect. I don't see any slowdown that wouldn't be there in the original arcade board. All of the graphics seem to be drawing pretty well. There was a little bit of a sprite missing there, but I do believe that's in the original arcade board as well. But if you see anything that doesn't look right to you, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, because I would be curious. It's not my favorite game in the world. It is a ton of fun, but I don't have a photographic memory of what's supposed to happen when you play Total Carnage. But all of these text boxes that pop up, they seem to be working perfectly fine as far as I can tell. And of course, you're going to be talking about the Pleasure Dome, something that is inherent to Total Carnage and a lot of fun just to kind of play around with. But again, it's great to see this actually work on MiSTer FPGA, and I do hope it sees future developments so we can get more of these games running. At least if only 2 of these games ran, Total Carnage and Smash TV, it would be great to get the sound hardware implemented as well. It wouldn't just be a benefit to these boards, it would be a benefit to MiSTer in and of itself. But let's move on to some of the games that aren't working so you can better understand what is going on under the hood and what actually isn't functioning. Because something like Total Carnage here, outside of the audio being missing, you really wouldn't know that this core was not complete. If we move over to another game, you're going to see that there is a lot of graphical flickering, and that seems to be the issue with the games that don't work. You're not getting everything drawn on the screen at once, and that seems to be down to the Dual Ram implementation and how it is talking to each other. Now, I'm sure Pramod's tried everything he can. I'm not saying whatsoever he's not capable of doing this. I'm just saying that that is what seems to be the limitation currently. The BRAM speeds and being able to actually implement them within MiSTer FPGA. But again, it will be curious to see what happens in the future, because these are a lot of the most wanted cores on MiSTer FPGA. So I do think that if not Pramod, somebody else is going to take a look at this work, and I bet we do see some improvements going forward. But when there's not much on the screen, everything seems to be fine. But when we actually get into the kickoff, you're going to see that there is a lot of different garbage on screen. This is not how the game should look whatsoever. It doesn't really look like if the hardware was failing on a real board. It looks different than I've ever seen. But if you want to play Smash TV or Total Carnage today on MiSTer FPGA, you can 100% do so. Just be aware again that you're not going to be getting any sound effects or any music unless there's some deep hidden menu setting in the test menu or in the MiSTer FPGA core in and of itself. It just doesn't seem like the sound has been implemented whatsoever. And be aware again, like I said earlier in the video, this is going to be 100% a manual install situation. This is not yet on Update All. I'm not sure when or if it will come to Update All. We'll have to wait and see in the future. But if you feel like playing around with a fun new alpha core this weekend, definitely play Smash TV and definitely play Total Carnage. If you pick just one, I would recommend Smash TV. It is my favorite of the two games we currently have working correctly on the core, but leave me a comment down below and tell me which one you prefer, because I would be curious. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future with this. Like I said, because a lot of the source code is open source, it's possible that another developer comes along and takes a look at this, because that happens very often on MiSTer FPGA. But I know you guys have been waiting for news on this core. It is here today in its alpha state, and you can play 2 of the games that run on the board relatively well. Short of that, if you have any questions, leave me a comment down below. I will have a video on the Neo Geo Pocket core tomorrow. I decided to run this one Saturday and move that one to Sunday. Short of that, we are done, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.